Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. Arsenal got back to winning ways, beating Monaco 3-0 in the Champions League last night. Not quite as straightforward as it might sound. Plenty to get into in that game, so we'll do that in just a moment. But we have a couple of guests for you today. A little later on, I will be talking to David Squires, cartoonist whose work I'm sure many of you know from The Guardian every week. He's been on the Arsecast before, and he's got a brand new book out, which we're going to give you a chance to win one of a couple of copies of as well. We're going to talk to David about the book, the work he does, how he does it, some of the Arsenal characters as well. And like I said, you can win a copy of his new book a bit later on in the show. So stick around for that. That is coming after we pay attention to last night's Champions League win over Monaco. And with me to delve into all of that is Phil Costa. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Andrew. How are we doing?
We're doing all right, thanks. Arsenal sitting quite nicely in this gigantic Champions League table, much nicer than some other clubs, which we might touch on in a few minutes' time. But a 3-0 win over Monaco last night, and I think an interesting game to discuss, to consider, because certainly this was one which could have been out of sight by half-time. Sense of nervousness in the second half because we didn't put those chances away. But ultimately, I think a scoreline, when you look at it, on the balance of play, when you look at the stats, you look at the XG, you look at the amount of big chances created by both sides, Arsenal fully deserved the 3-0 win, albeit in circumstances that were a little odd, you know, the way it played out over the 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think you summed it up quite nicely in the blog this morning. It was a scoreline that I think reflected the game, but also didn't at the same time. Yeah. We were utterly dominant in the first half and should have been, 2 or 3 goals up anyway. Martinelli missed chances. Odegaard put another shot wide. Jesus missed his ones. But then the second half was a little bit strange. I think Monaco made a change that we didn't really know how to cope with initially, tactically, early in the second half. But overall, this was no contest. I think Monaco, yes, they improved in the second half, but we were never under any real danger. And overall, the 3-0 scoreline, the 3-0 win was fairly reflective of the 90 minutes, I would say, not just the 45 and the 45 if you broke them up into 2 separate things.
All right, well, look, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what happened, particularly in the first half and the first part of the second half, I think, which are quite, distinct based on what we saw. But before the game, there were a lot of worries about injuries and who was going to be available. Once again, no Gabriel, no Ricardo Calafiori, no Alexander Zinchenko, and Jurriën Timber left on the bench from the start, which you have to think, along with, let's say, the second half substitution of Declan Rice after about an hour thereabouts. This is what Arteta is talking about when he says they're having to manage players. Like, they can do 60 minutes or they can do 30 minutes in the case of Timber when he came on. But the big selection decision was like, well, what is he going to do? We were all wondering what he might do at right back if Partey and Timber weren't available. Partey started the game, played another game at right back. Then it was about who he was going to play at left back. So his decision or his choices really were to play Myles Lewis-Skelly or to play Kieran Tierney. And he's gone with Myles Lewis-Skelly. And I think this is quite fascinating. I just want to play a little clip here of Arteta talking in his pre-Monaco press conference. And the discussion is about the role of the left back in the team, as we have come to know it, with Zinchenko inverting, with Calafiori inverting. For want of a better way of putting it, everybody understands what we're talking about when we say that. And then he was asked this question, and then there's this response.
Can Kieran play that way, or is it still a work in progress even though he's been at the club for 5 years?
I would put Kieran more in his strengths now. If we do what we have to do, I will play him in position, especially in attack situations, in scenarios, spaces that he's more comfortable with. That's a learning.
So basically he said, look, I've seen from past experience, this is not a role that he's particularly comfortable with. I would play him to his strengths. And that's not his strength. So for Lewis-Skelly to come in and make his first Champions League start, not his Champions League debut, but his first Champions League start at left back against a good Monaco side, and to just slot in there as comfortably as he did, is a testament to his talent, his potential, his quality and everything else. But I think it's Arteta giving a nod to the future as well. Like, do I give minutes to Kieran Tierney, who with all due respect probably isn't going to be part of Arsenal's long-term future, or do I play the player who might be a little raw, a little inexperienced, but who I believe can play that role the way I want it to be played, and who is undoubtedly going to be part of Arsenal's future? I think it told us quite a bit about the potential of Lewis-Skelly, and also kind of where Kieran Tierney is in the pecking order, which I think is not news to anybody. It's what we've understood for a while now anyway.
Yeah, I was about to say that this wouldn't have been a shock or new to anybody who's followed Arsenal over the last 12 to 18 months. We've seen Tierney look very uncomfortable in those positions in terms of him coming inside, needing to offer a bit in possession, an ability to receive the ball on the half turn. He just hasn't got that. And I think it's a bit unfair of us to expect that from him as well. Obviously, players can develop and add things to their game, but his game is very one-dimensional, I think. And that's not to say it in a bad way. I just think Kieran Tierney is very good at what Kieran Tierney is very good at. But yeah, really, really impressed with Lewis-Skelly to come in at 18 years of age, like you said, your Champions League debut. He looked comfortable, and that can only be a good thing for him and for us. I mean, Arteta spoke about him before the game, referencing his personality, his leadership on the pitch, and I think we saw some of that last night. He seems to be very mature and grounded and quite calm, not really fazed by the occasion. But there's a lot to like about his game, and I don't know if you want to touch on him now,
sure,
or if
yeah,
you want to touch on him on a wider sense. But I just, looking at him purely on a statistical sense, 45 out of 47 passes completed, 97%, 4 progressive passes on the night. But I just love his game. He can burst through those central areas. You can see that his teammates aren't scared to give him the ball under pressure.
That's true. Same with Nwaneri when he first started coming into the team. Like, the senior players are happy to give him the ball and let him. And what's even more interesting or exciting is that they're willing to give him passes in positions or areas where you would expect an experienced player to be able to deal with it. Sometimes you play it safe with a kid, with a young player. You don't want to put them under too much undue pressure, whereas that's not the case with this Arsenal team. Like, there was a moment, I think, I can't remember if it was first half or second half, but he's literally standing, there's 3 Monaco players around him, and he gets, it's just a wall pass from Saliba, gives it back, moves it on. But those kinds of areas tell you a lot about how a player is viewed by those around him.
Yeah, the players rate good players, and you can see who they avoid, who they look for on the pitch. There is a real bravery in possession. Obviously, we saw the pass that led to the first goal last night, but there was another against Bolton earlier this season where he played Raheem Sterling through, and his education in midfield would have inspired that. Something else I like about him, and it feels quite simple, but using his backside or his body and his arms to make sure that he's always positioned well and in control of the ball. I've watched him a fair bit at youth level, and that has become a bit of a trademark, along with that little small touch away from pressure when it looks like he might lose the ball. He's happy to welcome people, to very close quarters, and then just a little body shimmy away. So you can see that he's very confident in his own ability. Players are confident in him. And I think Declan Rice deserves credit too, because he played an important role in providing a foil for Lewis-Skelly last night. It wasn't hand-holding by any means, but he was always available, happy to bounce passes off him. And his ability to cover space meant that Lewis-Skelly could be more adventurous in his positioning without worrying too much about his defensive work. So overall, a really good night for him, a really good performance. And absolutely, this was a nod to the future. This was a nod to Myles Lewis-Skelly being a real contributor to this Arsenal team, as opposed to Kieran Tierney, who, let's be honest, is kind of looking at the exit door, I think, maybe even as soon as January.
So look, while we're talking about him, and before that we discuss some of the other chances in that first half, let's talk about the goal that he was involved in. And that, ability to deal with the ball under pressure in a relatively tight space. It's not like he's crowded out, but there is a big Monaco guy right there. The turn away from him is really lovely, but what I like most is the pass, and not just the precision of the pass, the weight of the pass into Gabriel Jesus, whose movement is really good, actually. He looks along the line, stays on side. I think it's a great pass into him from Lewis-Skelly. I also think it's a really good ball across the box from...
It's a brilliant cross.
From Gabriel Jesus. Like, he makes it as easy as it could possibly be for Bukayo Saka to score that goal and make it 1-0.
Yeah, I think the overall move is brilliant. I must have counted maybe 20, 25 passes in the build-up. We moved it patiently from side to side. Obviously, the ball arrives at Lewis-Skelly. He skips past Akliouche in the middle, plays a lovely ball. Jesus receives it really well, and then the cross is perfect for Saka at the back post. I mean, it's just a lovely goal. And if you think about some of the opportunities that were missed in this game, even before the goal, football can be a really funny sport sometimes, and we've said that before. Speaking on the 30 or other podcasts, you know, sometimes players can have a bit of brain fog in front of goal. They lose their composure, but this was a real team move. And I'm not going to say that Monaco were great defensively, but the way we just mapped around the pitch, navigated some players out of position, I thought it was a really good move, a team move. And yeah, the pass from Lewis-Skelly makes it. I think there's a real certainty and bravery in that pass to open up the game, and thankfully we make the most of it.
Yeah, so that was about 34 minutes, and we did have chances before that, obviously, to score the first goal and to turn, you know, what I think was a dominant performance in that first half, and a very good performance as well. You know, I think there was a big spotlight on Arsenal for this game in particular after what had happened against Fulham. And, you know, while I completely get the frustration at drop points, and I get the frustration that we couldn't find the goals, I do think just a little bit there are elements of that Fulham performance which were just a little bit overblown, right? Because it's not like we do that too often. It can happen. It happens to lots of teams. It happens to pretty much every team. And I think we need something else in the forward three. I'm not denying that, but I just think sometimes you're going to draw a game away from home, and it's more about the context of how that or where that draw happened. With what's going on around us, more than it just being a particularly abysmal Arsenal performance. I think it was painted as something a little worse than it was. It wasn't great, but it wasn't quite end of the world for me anyway, right? But I think what was very promising about this performance, and look, I didn't really expect Gabriel Jesus to start up front in this game. I was a little surprised at that selection. I was disappointed with him on Sunday against Fulham, and I went in a bit hard. Maybe not. But I was glad to see that there were at least some green shoots from Jesus in this game. So the overall performance, I think, was a lot better. There were lots of chances being created. Odegaard had a couple of shots. I think Saka had a shot. And then there's this long ball from Kivior from the back. And I might just ask you about Kivior in a minute, because I think it's interesting. But it's a great ball over the top. Gabriel Jesus is going through on goal. And this is a guy who's scored once in his last 31 Arsenal games. And you're going, come on, not just for Arsenal, but for yourself, you know, to restore some bit of confidence, to try and recapture some bit of form. Please put this one away. It felt a bit like the sort of finish from a guy who hasn't scored or has scored one goal in 31 games, right? It wasn't terrible. Kept his eye on the ball, didn't really look at the goalkeeper, though. That's where I think an informed striker has a quick look at the goalkeeper. I think he was so concerned with making sure he made decent contact or half decent contact with the ball. He didn't really look at where the goalkeeper was, because I think if he just takes a quick glance, he can slot that beyond him. It felt, you know, people often say, like, is it a good save or is it a bad miss? I think it was more a bad miss than a good save for his first chance anyway.
The first one, yeah. Especially because the goalkeeper hesitates initially. You can see him come out and then he drops back onto his line. There's a bit of hesitancy there, which gives Jesus the chance to run in.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. I know I can completely understand the focus on wanting to connect cleanly with the ball. I don't think he does really. It's kind of a scuffed, half volleyed finish kind of thing, and it's a bit central for my liking. Again, we were chatting during the game, and you just think, you need something to go in, just for his peace of mind, for our peace of mind, for the stat not to become a stat, if that makes sense. It almost became a £72 million Nicola Pepe kind of thing. It's just every game there's another number on top of this scoreless run for Jesus. And I get why people would be annoyed with him for missing that one and even the second one. But at least this looked a bit more like Jesus than some of the recent substitute appearances, where, let's be honest, he's been totally peripheral, ineffective, loose in possession. I mean, would I have liked to have seen him bury one of those chances? Absolutely. But he's never been an elite finisher, which isn't an excuse. It's just the truth. What we need from him is involvement, touches on the ball, drifting wide, drop him short, to pull markers away, vacate space for others. And I think you referenced the Fulham game. He had 8 touches against Fulham on Sunday, completed one of his 6 passes and lost possession 5 times alone in that short cameo. And I thought he was much neater last night, much tidier, and more importantly, involved. He looked dangerous despite missing those opportunities. And I think it's clear that he doesn't have a future at Arsenal, but we need him to contribute this season at least. And if this performance can boost his confidence a bit or prove to Arteta and to his teammates that he can be trusted, I'm all for it. But obviously I would have liked to have seen him score one of those chances.
I think the second one is actually, it's more of a good save than a bad miss.
Agreed. And I think Kehrer does well as well to get back to him.
Yeah. Like, he has to hold off the defender. He has to take the shot. He nearly gets the rebound. I think it was a pass from Martinelli that put him through, and he held off the defender well to take the shot. Keeper made a good save in that instance, I think. But you look at the numbers, 3 shots on target, 2 key passes in the game. That at least is something. Like I said, some green shoots, because I was really worried after Sunday that this was slightly terminal. Is somebody just going to unplug the machine here and we'll all have a moment's silence and move on? But I was glad to see it, even if I think, at least one of those opportunities that he had should have gone in. Now, he wasn't alone, it's fair to say, in fluffing his lines in front of goal. Martin Odegaard, credit to him. He won the ball high up the pitch. He goes scampering through, looks to the far post, puts it just wide of the far post. I know hindsight 2020, and you're under pressure and you've got a split second to make a decision. I just felt like with his left foot, with the body shape that he can produce, with the body shape of the goalkeeper, the other side would have been the one for me, because you don't give yourself much of a margin for error when the goalkeeper can stick out a left leg and you've got to put it, just inside that post. But it's a bad miss. He should absolutely score from that chance.
Yeah, he should. I was quite amazed that he didn't, to be honest. I was just expecting the ball to nestle into the corner. And I think you were maybe being a bit generous saying he was under pressure, because I don't think he was. Beyond the goalkeeper maybe coming out to narrow the angle a bit, this was as good a chance as he would have gotten on the night. So yeah, quite surprised at him missing that one. Obviously, it's his work that creates the opportunity. Maybe a bit of a hospital pass from the Monaco defender as well. But either way, he needs to be there, ready to pounce, and he was. It's a bad miss. That one's a bad miss, and I think the Martinelli one as well. The second one in particular, having been put through by Odegaard, it's a gorgeous pass. I mean, a bit of an Ozil-esque bounce to that, if I'm going to put that out into the world. Again, Monaco playing it out poorly from the back. That became a bit of a theme on the night. But look, the offside flag went up. It wasn't offside, and I think if that had gone in, it would have been a goal. But he just doesn't catch it right. Again, kind of similarly to Jesus, it hits the wrong part of his boot. It was a bit studdy. He didn't really get over it. It wasn't a clean connection. But look, these are the chances that you need your players to score. And the fact that it was 1-0 at halftime, I think Arteta would have been quite frustrated with that, because even though we were in control, even though we were dominant, things can change very quickly, and they very nearly did less than a minute into the second half. But I never really felt that we were in danger of losing this game, but it needs to be a theme in this Arsenal team. Punish teams when you've got them on the ropes.
Yeah, that's it. It's about being clinical, isn't it? And this, I suppose, is another dimension to the discussion that people will have about what Arsenal need in the forward line. Do Arsenal need something else in that front three? I think absolutely. I don't think there's a person in the world who would deny, based on what we've seen from a couple of players, or not seen from a couple of players indeed this season, that there is a need for something else in that forward line. But then it's like, what is it? Is it a striker? Is it a 9? Is it a classic centre forward? Is it a wide player? I mean, I'm open. I have to say, Phil, I'm open to the possibility of it being, anyone who can come in, but give us just a little more, be a bit more clinical in that final third. Because, that game last night, at least I think Arsenal should have been 3-0 up at halftime. And then you're talking about a different second half. You're talking about a comfortable stroll through the second period, and maybe, a different discussion today. But when you don't score, you leave yourself open to the sucker punch, if you want to call it that. I mean, it's you've let your guard down basically, so you're going to get sucker punch. But I think it also feeds into the atmosphere, because everyone's thinking, oh shit, we should have taken those chances. And then, like you say, very early in the second half, there is I think it was it Kehrer with a header just wide? Marino, I think, does just enough, but he puts a header wide quite early in the second half. Monaco made a change. They brought on Minamino. They shifted things around a little bit. Arteta said what did he say? Basically, they played with 6 players in the interior and only had fullbacks giving them width, which meant that there were all these overloads all over the place. And it took Arsenal some time to come to terms with that. Monaco did have chances. There was one from Minamino, and then there was one for Mbolo as well when Saliba gave the ball away. So those moments where the finish isn't quite right from the opposition, they let you off the hook a little bit. Maybe, you get a little bit of luck along the way. Lord knows we've had too much of the other stuff this season so far, but it would be one of those situations where, if the goal goes in, people are just going to say, well, that's it. You pay the price for not taking your chances. And, it's impossible to argue.
Yeah, it's a completely fair thing to say. And Monaco did make a good change at halftime. Like you said, look, they're no mugs. They had an identical record to Arsenal coming into this game in Europe. They're doing very well in Ligue 1, even though they've bumbled and stumbled a bit recently. But they're a good young team. I mean, Akliouche, Ben Seguir, 2 very exciting players. They've got Lamine Camara in midfield, who I thought was very good in the second half. But the main change was they brought Mangasa off and brought Minamino on. And they dropped Golovin back into a deeper role, which helped their build-up, but also, like you said, outnumbered Arsenal in midfield. So for that 15, 20, even 25-minute phase in the second half, we lost our way. There was no real way to maintain possession. We had no out ball. There were 1 or 2 iffy moments in possession, like you said, with Saliba. There was another one with Timber as well. They had chances. That Mbolo one, I thought we were very fortunate to get away with because he struck it cleanly. It just went to the other side of the post instead of inside down at Raya's left-hand side. But I think it was clear at that point that Mikel had to change something, and the substitutes made a big impact, particularly Kai Havertz and Jorginho, who were just able to give us a focal point, some added energy in the forward areas, particularly in the press. And Jorginho was able to get his foot on the ball, slow things down. We wrestled back a bit of control in the game. And Monaco, if they were going to score, they needed to score in that moment where they were on top. But then as soon as we made the changes, we looked a bit more settled, a bit more assured. And we kind of saw the game out from there. They made a couple of mistakes. But yeah, the subs did a big help in that moment. They were, just a couple of things for them to worry about, basically. And, I think in the Champions League, it's fine to accept that some phases of the game will go against you. But instead of it being a 5 or 10 minute phase, it just stretched a little bit too long for my liking, even if Monaco weren't exactly peppering our goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, you could make the argument from a Monaco perspective that with that kind of dominance, you need to make more of that at this level in the Champions League, so that there is that side of it, but it was a little bit worrying, I have to say. Before we just get onto the changes and go into those in a little bit more detail on the other goals that we scored, I want to ask you about Gabriel Martinelli in the first half, where he got a yellow card. I think it's an obvious yellow card for a foul which stopped a counter-attack. And then there was another foul which on TV, I think we were watching the same coverage on TNT Sport, that tiresome Fletch guy, was going on and on and on about how that was a second yellow card. Now, I think it's a foul. I don't think it was a second yellow card. I don't think a player should be sent off for that. I think we've seen them, still think they're harsh. Maybe you get more likely to get them in the Premier League these days than in Europe, which is kind of a flip around based on what we've seen previously, where it used to be European refs were a little more trigger happy, shall we say.
A little more. Jesus, some of those games we've played in Europe have been awful when it comes to fouls and yellow cards like that.
I know. But there was another foul then on the edge of the box. He's just tussling for the ball. I thought, again, it was a little bit overblown from TNT Sport to focus on this and to focus on Martinelli. But I think what sort of put the heebie-jeebies up Arsenal fans was there was a touch of petulance to Martinelli's second half cameo against Fulham, where he got a yellow card for slamming the ball down, and there was another foul where the referee came over, had a quick word, and we've been burned so often and so harshly by red cards this season. How did you view that situation? Because I was of a mind at halftime. I'm not sure I'd let Martinelli give the referee another decision to make. Now, to be fair, he didn't in the end. But, does that contribute to your second half performance when you've got a player, let's say, like Martinelli, who is diligent defensively, but who can't make tackles? He can't risk making a tackle because another one is basically going to get him a second yellow card.
Yeah, potentially. I was quite surprised to see him come out for the second half, actually. In my head, it seemed like an easy switch. Leandro Trossard for Martinelli. He was definitely treading the tightrope, if that's a phrase to use. Again, they weren't obvious fouls, but purely through that first yellow card and then accumulation, you always worry that a referee might say, look, you've given me an opportunity to send you off here. You've given me a chance to do it. And I think I appreciated that from him, in that he recognized the fouls. He recognized the game. He said, I don't need to send somebody off for this. Which I think some Premier League referees could look at for some inspiration. Chris Kavanagh. But I think what we're seeing at the moment is just a bit of frustration seeping into Martinelli, because he's so desperate to make an impact. He's so desperate to help the team and score and get his assists. And he's obviously seeing Bukayo Saka on the other side doing it every week, and he thinks, oh God, I'm being left behind here. Yeah. So it just feels to me like this is Martinelli. He's quite an all-action player, involved, quite aggressive in terms of his style and his game. And yes, there maybe were a couple of moments where you're like, maybe don't do that on halfway when you're chasing someone who's potentially breaking. But yeah, I didn't understand the kind of focus on it during the commentary, and then at halftime to look at it again when there were like a million chances that they could have gone over that Arsenal had missed. But yeah, maybe don't give referees the opportunity is what I would say, especially when you see how we've been burned already this year.
I mean, I think you said to me, we were talking on WhatsApp, like, would there have been that focus on a Monaco player in the same circumstances?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. So, I understand why people get a bit worried about a scenario like that, but to me, it was very much storm in a teacup kind of stuff. So look, You mentioned the substitutes. He brought off Lewis-Skelly. He brought off Rice, which again, as I mentioned, I think is about managing his load because he was playing quite well. It's hard to properly assess. This is the first time we've seen a Rice, Merino, Odegaard midfield. We only got an hour of it, basically, because Rice came off before Arteta made changes. What was your assessment of it in that hour?
I liked it. I think there's a nice balance of attributes in there that you can see working. Obviously, we know that Rice is an excellent 6. He was good again yesterday, did the simple things very well, but showed some adventure in possession. And then in Merino, you've kind of got a halfway house between Odegaard and Rice. Someone who can be physical, someone who can be an interception guy, a tackle guy, but also show some bits further forward, whether it's in the left half space or maybe crashing the box. And then you've got Odegaard, who's the pure playmaker. So there's a real nice balance of attributes and qualities in those three. Do we need to see more of it? Yes. Monaco on the night were not the most difficult opposition, although they did give us some issues. But I think longer term, it's a midfield I'd like to see a bit more often, although for various reasons we haven't been able to see it. I thought last night was a good time to try it, and for the most part it worked well beyond that little spell in the second half where it didn't. Yeah. So
when nothing did,
yeah,
really. Yeah.
Nice to see it. Nice to see it.
Yeah, I hope we see a bit more of it. I thought Rice was really good, actually. I thought some of the long passing was good, and his ability to deal with possession in tight areas was good. Like, I was impressed by Rice, and when he came off, it made it very clear that this was not a performance-based substitution. This was a fitness-based substitution, and I liked some of what Merino gave us as well. Some good combinations with Martinelli, particularly early on. There was one great ball across the box, which I think maybe we could have attacked a little bit better, and a good ball for Martinelli in the second half as well to set him free. So encouraging signs.
There was one that evaded Jesus by a couple of inches as well when he was sliding in. I mean, just again, before the subs, what did you make of the left-hand side? Obviously, instead of Timber and Rice as the left back and the left 8, who are both right-footed, we had Lewis-Skelly and Merino in those positions. Did you think it helped Arsenal look a bit more fluid and a bit more varied in terms of their build-up?
Yeah, I think we looked a bit more balanced. We didn't lean to the right as much as possible. I've seen people talk about Bukayo Saka and say, was he a bit quiet last night? Maybe. In some aspects of the game, in others, very obviously not. But I think, when you're heavily dependent on him, when one side of the pitch isn't really functioning as well as you would like, it places quite a heavy burden on him. I think we were more willing to switch it up and go across field than we have been in previous games. I think the Lewis-Skelly operating in tandem with Merino, though what was very interesting, particularly in the first half, was when Arsenal announced the team, it said Merino partners Rice. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Merino is not partnering Rice. Rice is anchoring this midfield, and Merino is playing quite a good bit forward from him in areas, dare I say it, that we enjoyed seeing Granit Xhaka in the last 18 months of his Arsenal career.
Agreed. I think in general, left-footed players are more comfortable playing towards the touchline that they're on. They are more comfortable running into those half spaces, and it just gives the opposition something extra to worry about. Instead of Arsenal funneling all of their play towards the right-hand side, where the opposition can then double up on Martin Odegaard and Bukayo Saka every time. I think, as you mentioned, in the first half, Merino making those Xhaka runs beyond Martinelli, could have had a couple of assists. But in general, I just think that willingness to go out to the left made a big difference to our overall build-up. I think it opens up the pitch, and you can see how much more varied our build-up is as opposed to just going to Saka every single time.
It shifts the opposition around as well, because they have to shuffle over, and when the ball does come to Saka, there's maybe just a little bit more space for him to operate in.
Yeah, that's the plan, and I think we've been. Again, not all of it has been self-inflicted. Some of it's been due to injury, to suspension. I think Calafiori would be a regular fixture in this team were it not for injury. But just having Lewis-Skelly and Marino on that side, more willing to look wide, more willing to bounce passes off each other, made a difference to our overall play, especially in the first half.
Just a quick one on Lewis-Skelly before we move on with the final couple of goals and the change that I think really did make an impact in the game. Was that the kind of performance that Mikel Arteta would, I'm not going to say would have dreamt of, but what he's got at right back for the next couple of months at least until Ben White comes back, he's got Jurrien Timber and he's got Thomas Partey, and they are his two options. And I'm guessing in an ideal world, he does not want to be playing both of those players at the same time, with Partey on the right or Timber on the left. I don't think too many Arsenal fans want to see that either, because I think Timber at right back is by far our best option there. Partey has done the job that's been asked of him in that role, but I think if you envisage this Arsenal team playing as well as it can, it is with somebody like Timber or Ben White at right back instead. And that's not criticism of Partey. I just think he plays the role differently from those two. On Sunday against Fulham, there probably was a little caution from Arteta. There probably was a little like, can I throw Lewis-Skelly in against Adama Traore? Can I throw Lewis-Skelly in against Alex Iwobi or whoever's going to come down that right-hand side? It might be a lot to ask of him. So is this performance, is that hour and a bit that we got from him yesterday sufficient for Mikel Arteta to have faith in him in a Premier League game should he be required?
I think so. I don't see why not. And look, it's important to note that he's been out with injury as well. I think Arteta said he had an infection in his foot or something like that. Yeah. So again, that's another option that we haven't really had over the last couple of weeks. But this performance and the ease of his inclusion, his comfort at being able to play in that role, in that part of the pitch, I don't see why it can't be or can't make him an option for selection, especially at home when we're going to dominate the ball and we need those overloads in central areas, as we know Arteta likes to do and likes to use. He is absolutely an option. And I think with Jurrien Timber now, look, perfectly usable at left back, but he's shown recently that he is far more effective at right back. And I think having to change him again to compensate Thomas Partey on the right side, for example, takes something away from Arsenal. So being able to drop Lewis-Skelly in for half an hour, for an hour here or there, at home, potentially against weaker opposition, could be a really useful thing for Arsenal. So look, I'm not saying he should be first choice, and that would be ridiculous to ask of him and to expect of him, but I don't see why we can't use him a bit more often, a bit like how we've been using Waneri in recent weeks as well, to replace Ødegaard, to use him for 20, 30 minutes here and there to give us something different during the game. No issue with it at all. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I think you already mentioned this, but Havertz coming on made the big difference for me. I think what he gave us was an ability to bypass the Monaco press and how they played in our half. I think the first thing of note that he did, it was about 2 or 3 minutes after he came on, was I think the ball was cleared. It could have been a corner, something like that. The ball's cleared into our midfield. It's bouncing around. He takes a touch. He holds it up. He plays a pass over the top of the nearby defender into the path of Trossard, who breaks upfield. Nothing comes of it. But I think when you look at that moment and what happens from that point on, that is the key change for me. And that is the thing that gave Monaco like, now we've got something different to contend with.
Yeah, definitely. And when Monaco had that spell of possession, you sent me a kind of field tilt image about how dominant they really were in terms of possession during that first 20, 25 minutes. And then Billy Carpenter at full time showed the full second half in terms of the field tilt. And then you can see the almost exact moment that Kai Havertz came onto the pitch. It's like a whole bunch of yellow for Monaco, and then the red is back basically seconds, minutes after his introduction. So this isn't a slight on Gabriel Jesus, by the way. the game just required something else. And I think what Havertz can offer you is physicality, a reference point, a focal point, someone to hold up the ball. You can bounce off him. He can bring others into play. And yeah, I thought he did a really good job. He gave us an added impetus and a fresh energy in the press. We could see that Monaco were not entirely comfortable at the back with possession. Thilo Kehrer, Mohamed Salisu, not great. And we know a bit about them from their time in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that makes the second goal. That ability to press, the way he curves his run is so intelligent because he forces Monaco into a corner. Because he initially looks, a bit laboured. He's jogging, and then all of a sudden he switches on. And I think they panic in that moment. The back pass from Salisu is awful. The goalie's not sure what he wants to do with it. But yeah, I absolutely think that his introduction just gave Arsenal a freshness that we'd maybe been lacking for that little period in the game, for sure.
Yeah, involved heavily in the second goal, closing down. I think the finish from Saka, because it's close range, everyone goes, yeah, you've got to score from there. But what he's got to do actually is lift it beyond the goalkeeper, who is in close proximity. I think it's a very smart finish. It's not the most difficult goal he'll ever score, obviously, but I think the finish is smart.
Agreed, and they were saying it's an easy one.
No,
on
that's
the
not easy.
But he's under pressure there from the goalkeeper and the defender. Yeah. So, again, it's a quick shuffle out to his left foot, a nice finish into the corner. It's just really funny how inevitable he's starting to feel at this point. Yeah. I call it the Mohamed Salah gene. Because no matter how involved or uninvolved he is during games, I'm still expecting him to score or create something. And we saw that again last night. This wasn't his best performance by any means, but Arsenal won 3-0 and he scored 2 goals and got an assist.
Yes.
So when everyone else was apparently allergic to scoring, who steps up? Saka. When any of our attacking players get into good areas, shooting positions, who do you back above everybody else to find the net? Saka.
Yeah.
When games are level and we need somebody to put us ahead, to break the game open, who is usually the scorer of those goals? It's Saka. He's just an unbelievable player, and we had to hear all that nonsense about him needing to prove himself and perform in the Champions League to show everyone that he's world class, blah, blah, blah. He's now got 14 goal contributions in 14 games in the competition. 8 goals, 6 assists. I don't know what more we can say about him. He's just an unbelievable player, and his standing in the team has just risen with each passing season. And I you know what, I was going to say it afterwards, but I really loved the interview with Lewis-Skelly afterwards, because you can see at 23, he's already becoming a leader and a reference point to those younger players, especially the Hale Enders who have watched him come through. He's made this journey, but he's becoming the uncle now he's becoming the fun uncle to the nieces and nephews. And it's really funny to see this personal development as well as the technical one. I love him, man. I just love him. We're so lucky to have him.
How can you not? Not just with what he does on the pitch, but I think Arteta talked about him afterwards, the example that he shows to the young players like Nwaneri and Lewis-Skelly, who are coming through, who are looking at him and going, look at this. This is what you can do if you really, work hard, play to your potential, develop. Be serious about your football career, which Saka obviously is, and he's a very, very special talent. But I think he is emblematic of what the academy can produce and should be producing. So I think for those two in particular, and you're right, I love the interview as well. Like at one point, I think Saka said something about how he was very proud of Lewis-Skelly, and Lewis-Skelly just like doing that little gesture on his heart. It's just like, oh, it's so sweet, actually, and it must be something, for a kid like Lewis-Skelly to come in and get those kind of plaudits from someone like Saka, who again is only 23. Only 23. He's an absolute gem. He really is. Where's the stat from Orbinho? Only 8 players have scored more goals in European competition for Arsenal than Bukayo Saka.
That's wild.
Any guesses on who those 8 players are? Go on.
Thierry Henry.
Yeah.
Theo Walcott?
Yep.
Alexis Sanchez?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, wow. Robert Pires?
No.
Freddie Ljungberg?
Yes, he's one of them.
Okay. I don't think Dennis Bergkamp will be there purely because of the
he's not
flight phobia.
Yeah, I'll give you them. It's Henry with 42, 18 for Theo Walcott and Robin Van Persie.
Oh, Van Persie,
15.
of course.
Yeah, no, we all try and forget Van Persie, I understand. 15 for Olivier Giroud and Ian Wright, and 14 for Aaron Ramsey, Freddie Ljungberg and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Saka level on 13 now with Alexandre Lacazette and Aaron Ramsey. So, you know, this is a measure of what he is producing. Interestingly, I just went to the UEFA website, right? Because I wanted to have a look at where the third goal has been credited to. Because on the television, they were saying, well, sorry, Kai Havertz, it's gone down as an own goal. Mm-hmm. But still on the UEFA website, it is listed as a Havertz goal with a Saka assist.
Good.
So,
I mean, he does get the first touch. It definitely hits Thilo Kehrer.
Yeah.
But Havertz is the one that makes the move and the touch towards goal. So I think as long as it's on target, he should be credited with it. Look, it could have gone either way, but you know, it's his goal. He's the one that touches it first. And there was quite a funny bit afterwards with Saka saying he stole the hat trick. Yeah. He said, there's more to come. There's more to come. So,
yeah, I like that. It was like, oh, yeah, but it's coming. Don't worry. It's coming. I mean, that feels like, you know, the next thing for Bukayo Saka is to get the hat-trick. Did you see the interview with Thierry Henry and Alex Scott on BBC? It was like Football Focus or something.
I did.
I thought it was interesting in that Henry talked about Saka taking free kicks as maybe another string to his bow. And it does feel like, you know, Arteta is so into the idea of maximizing the possibility of every aspect of the game. You know, we don't really have that guy who, if the ball is put down 25 yards from goal, either side of the D, you're like, oh, I'm really confident that this could be at least a good chance. You know, someone like, I hate to say it, but, you know, someone like Bruno Fernandes at Manchester United, that when they get a free kick, you're a little bit worried because of the quality that he can produce on a regular basis. And that aspect of, you know, how can Saka get better? How can he deliver more? I just thought that might be quite interesting.
Well, even someone like Cole Palmer, for example, has shown that he can score free kicks, and I don't know why Saka wouldn't or shouldn't be able to do it.
Well, I mean, look at the corners.
Exactly. He takes corners almost perfectly every single time, puts them right where he wants to put them. His technique is very good. He can hit the ball with a lot of power and whip and curl. So I don't know why he shouldn't be able to take them. The same with Martin Odegaard. I know he scored that one against Burnley all those years ago, but we haven't seen Arsenal maximize free kicks enough, I think, and those two, especially Saka, should be kind of main candidates for that. But yeah, I thought the interview was really good. He was talking about his time at the academy, wasn't he, Henry? And he said, you know, the focus was on Alex Iwobi, Reece Nelson, Chris Willock, and then he said Bukayo Saka was fine. He was fine, and now he's doing this every week. And he said, I had no idea he would be able to be the player that he is today, which again speaks to his development and what he's been able to do from a variety of different positions. He's just a gem. You said it.
Yeah. To be fair, he was a little bit younger than those guys when Henry was at the academy. So, you know, you could understand why maybe it was more difficult to spot his potential. But look, what a player, what a guy, and hopefully there's a lot more to come from him, not just in the Champions League, but in the Premier League as we look ahead to Everton. Just very finally, like I said, it's a good night. It's 3 points. It's a clean sheet. It's a deserved win for Arsenal. We are currently third in the UEFA Champions League table behind Liverpool and Barcelona, ahead of Bayer Leverkusen, Aston Villa, Inter Milan, Brest and Lille on goal difference. So there's a clutch of teams on 13. They're basically saying you need 15 points to more or less ensure that you don't go through those. You don't have to play 2 more games, which, could be the last thing we need, particularly if we make progress in the Carabao Cup. So we're in good shape, and good to bounce back to winning ways. We can't not mention Manchester City though, Phil, because, look, it might last forever now. It may not last forever, but clearly they're not staying humble enough. They're beaten by Juventus last night. They are currently in 22nd place in this table, 25th and below, and you go out of Europe altogether. So quite fun to see Manchester City's travails continue.
Yeah, one win in 10 now?
Mental.
Which is just unthinkable. I mean, we needed them to drop, what was it, one point last season. Sorry. I'm not going to say it. But it's just typical, isn't it? That when we need them to do it, they don't.
Yeah.
But it's been a horrible run. A really, lost to Spurs, lost to Bournemouth, lost to Sporting, lost to Brighton, lost again to Spurs, drew against Feyenoord, having been 3-0 up at home, lost to Liverpool, beat Forest, drew against Palace, and now lost again to Juventus. That's a horrible run.
It is, and it's the Manchester Derby this weekend. Now they're hosting Manchester United at whatever the fuck their stadium is called. But the dynamics of a derby can be quite interesting. Sometimes you get these little bolts from the blue. After that, they've got Villa away, so a couple of tricky games to come.
Yeah, and it's not just City who are struggling, by the way. Real Madrid are in 20th place, PSG 25th. So there's kind of lots still to play out, and we're kind of sitting nice and comfortable and pretty. We've got Dinamo Zagreb in our next game, which I think if we win that, we should be fine. So yeah, overall, I think we've been very good. We've had a difficult run. Inter away, Atalanta away. Those are 2 very good teams. I mean, speaking about our away form, by the way, which has come under justified scrutiny, I would say it hasn't been good enough under Mikel Arteta.
In Europe?
Despite the recent, in Europe, despite the recent 5-1 win over Sporting. But Arsenal have now won all 6 of their home games without conceding in the Champions League group stage or league phase.
Wow.
Since the start of last season. So that's 4-0 against PSV, 2-0 against Sevilla, 6-0 against Lens, 2-0 against PSG, 1-0 against Shakhtar, and now 3-0 against Monaco. So no complaints there.
I can live with that.
If you're going to do anything in Europe, you need to win your home games.
That is very true, and we appear to be doing that quite well. Okay, look, we better leave it there. For now, Phil, take it easy, and we will catch up soon.
Nice one, man. Pleasure as always.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil. You can find him in all the usual social media places. Right, as promised, we do have another guest for you today, and it is a man whose work I'm sure loads of you know. It appears weekly in The Guardian. He's been on the Arsecast before. He has a fantastic way of looking at the game of football, the good, the bad, the everything in between, and conveying that via his cartoon strips. It's my pleasure to welcome back David Squires. Hello there.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good. This is a hat-trick of Arsecast appearances for you, because we did one like this before. We also did one in Sydney some years ago, sitting face to face, and now here you are again, and you're Australian this time.
Yes, that's right. Oh, yeah, I've got a citizenship since we saw each other. That's right, yeah. So this is a hat trick. Do I get to keep the podcast now? I've done 3 in a row.
That's it. It's like the World Cup, the Jules Rimet trophy. It's yours. It's yours now. The Australian citizenship, does that make you now very invested in Big Ange and what he's doing?
It's so funny seeing the Ange story go overground, because he's, I mean, as you probably know, he's adored here by the Australian football community. Mostly for what he achieved with Brisbane War and then with the Australian national team. They don't win much, obviously, but they won the Asian Cup in 2015. And so, yeah, there's this huge group of people who are incredibly invested in his progress, and as I'm sure you are,
and all the listeners.
And I do find it kind of like some people can't see any criticism of him or his methods, and so they're having a bit of they've had a rough week or rough couple of weeks, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
He's good value for my cartoons though, and he has been for years. But as ever, I'm more interested in the kind of reaction around him than to anything that he's doing himself. But you can see sort of the slow progression from when he first arrived at Tottenham and was so. Everyone was like, "Oh wow, he's a breath of fresh air. He's so fun. He's so, he's like a normal guy." And then gradually, as often happens at that club, he's slowly. Now he's almost gone full Antonio Conte. So
no man can avoid the Tottenham DNA. It's just not possible. I suppose one of the unfortunate consequences is there's probably going to be like a generation of Tottenham fans now, young Tottenham fans in Australia, who are going to have to grow up and deal with that grief for the next 40, 50 years as they watch that team.
I think it's a sort of modern phenomenon, isn't it, where people follow players and coaches rather than clubs themselves. So, maybe they'll be able to resist that sort of that particular, line of pain.
It's just a bad period in my life. I've put it behind me. I've moved on. I've chosen another team now. That's
right. Now I'm wherever Ange goes next, Panathinaikos or
Bound to be something like that. So look, you have a new book out. It's called Chaos in the Box, Chronicles from Modern Football. And this is a collection of your cartoon strips from, I think, just before 2019, 2018, up to the modern day. That's right?
That's correct. Yeah, it starts pretty much after, the weeks following the 2018 World Cup. And really the birth of a long-term character, which is Emo Mourinho.
Yeah.
That's when he really started. I mean, we just talking about Ange, but Jose really was during Man United's pre-season tour of the US, and he'd had a really nice summer, I think, enjoying Russian hospitality with Russia Today, guest of Vladimir. And then he went over to the US for United's pre-season tour, and he was in such a bad mood. And he was wearing this sort of bright pink hoodie a lot of the time, which must have been United's training gear at the time.
Yeah.
And he was grumbling about, Anthony Martial going back to Europe to attend the birth of his child. That's such a selfish behaviour. Not being allowed to get the players that he wanted, and he was complaining that, he said quite openly, if I was an American soccer fan, football fan, I wouldn't be coming to watch this dross kind of thing. And I started drawing him as an emo teenager. And I'm still sort of dipping into that almost to this day. But so that's pretty much where the book picks up, and then goes right the way through to the end of the Euros, so fairly recently.
How difficult is it, when you're doing that? And I don't know if you're like me, because, I write every day, I make podcasts every week. I often get people saying, "Oh, remember that thing you wrote about this?" Or, "Do you remember that bit you did on the podcast about that?" And I'm like, actually, no, not really, because it just sort of gets wiped out by the next thing. So the process from your perspective of having to whittle through all of the columns, all of the cartoons that you did for The Guardian, was it just a case of having to go back and read them all and look at them all again? Or were there things that obviously stuck out in your mind, things that you did remember that you go, okay, yeah, that one has got to go in the book?
There were certain ones that really stuck out in my mind, ones that I was proud of, or ones that had a particular positive response. And sometimes it might just be like one section of one cartoon that I remember had had resonated with people. But yeah, it was a matter of going back and trawling through all of them. And often, I don't know if you're the same, but often I'll do something and sort of deliberately try to forget about it almost. Like I find that if I look back at anything that I've drawn that's older than about 3 weeks old, I'll look at it and think, wow, what was I thinking? What an idiot. What's all this? So at times it was a slightly painful process, but at the same time, it's kind of good to realise that I'm not as awful as I managed to convince myself sometimes. And yeah, there were some good ones in there. And there you go. There's the quote for the book. There are some good ones in there.
Yeah, that's it.
And I did notice, and I do forget, as I say, I often forget a lot of the jokes I've done. I did notice this a few times during the sort of that 6-year process where I'd repeated a joke exactly the same, a year apart, and I'd done that a couple of times, and so I've left those out of the book, obviously, but yeah, it happens sometimes. The cartoon I was working on this week, which was about Jim Ratcliffe and basically Ineos buying Christmas. And I got halfway through and I was thinking, I'm sure I've done these jokes before. And it took about an hour looking back through all of my, Ineos stuff and, Jim Ratcliffe stuff. And I think it's all original, but we'll see. Someone will always point it out.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, is that something that you've maybe had to do now or start to do, is sort of categorize? Can you tag bits of work now? So if you do, like, you're doing another thing about Sir Jimmy, and he's, the feature of the cartoon, can you go back and look at other ones, or is it a case of going, right, when did I do that? Or you're going to have to like just use Google to find out when you put something together?
I'm sure there is a smart way of attacking these things and going back, but
you haven't got it.
I'm still analog, so it's still a matter of going to this set of drawers that I've got over there and physically looking through the hard copies. But yeah, sometimes I do Google David Squires Guardian Peter Drury cartoon, for example, or whoever it may be, and think, have I done this joke before? Just double check.
Are there things, in the cartoons and in the strips and the frames, even within the frames that you produce, that you really like? You submit your piece and you go, that is like bang, and people react to something else completely within the strip, and you go, hey, hang on a minute, I thought that was the thing. Sometimes
there are times where I think, oh wow, I've nailed this. It's not often, but I think, oh, this is a good one. This is gonna fly, And those are the ones that often sink without a trace. So I mean, it's good to be grounded sometimes, I suppose. But generally, I have an idea for when something is funny, or if there's a setup and a punchline and all the rest of it. And I've got a fairly honed radar after all these years to when something's going to work and land, but you never quite know.
No, I suppose the thing about what you do is, and having done it for such a long time, is that the inherent madness and mentalness of football players, managers, the industry, fandom, all of it provides a constant stream of stuff that you can use in your cartoon. So a couple of bits that I quite enjoyed. The Europa League final that Arsenal were involved in Baku against Chelsea, where Henrik Mkhitaryan could not attend the game for, it's ridiculous now, I think, even that Arsenal went ahead with that game in those circumstances. But you described it as the fire festival of football. And I enjoyed the bit about the Chelsea fan who, when 3 decided they might withdraw their sponsorship due to Roman Abramovich and Vladimir Putin and those connections and the war in Ukraine, sort of filming himself stomping up and down on his 3-router as a protest at the idea that someone might do something like this to their football club. And those are just 2 small examples. And all the way through the book, you're reminded of things that happen on a weekly basis that objectively are fucking nuts. And it just must be this mine of like gold every time. Like, I'm sure there are periods, like, for example, I'd say during the COVID period, it becomes more challenging. And I remember that myself, having to write and having to do podcasts, that it is more challenging, but you can sort of get into these veins of creativity to produce the things that you need to produce. But ultimately, what happens in football week in, week out, the stuff on the pitch is often secondary to the craziness that happens off it.
Yeah, my focus of interest has always been away from the pitch, I have to admit. And a couple of things that you touched on there. People filming themselves destroying their own property is one of my favourite subgenres of football support craziness. I think around that time there was a spate of them as well. I think there were Manchester United fans who were burning their Cristiano Ronaldo shirts when it looked like he was going to sign for Manchester City. I think there were Rangers fans who were destroying their Steven Gerrard merch when he left them for Villa. But yeah, I am constantly surprised by the crazy stories that football does continue to deliver. Because you just I might come to the start of a new season and think, okay, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and 10 years for The Guardian, and longer doing it just online for other people and just for myself. I think surely this is going to run out. But then, someone will do something completely insane. One of my favourites from recent years was when Jurgen Klopp did his hamstring while he was scream gloating in the face of a fourth official. That's just actually, when you get something like that, it's hard to make it funnier than
reality,
than the slapstick itself. But yeah, there's always someone else around the corner. There's always a new character who comes up, who's completely vain and lacking in self-awareness. Or, at the moment, we mentioned Jim Ratcliffe a minute ago. He's providing plenty of ammunition, and there's a steady conveyor belt of them, thankfully.
The strips that you produce aren't just funny. There's a lot of sometimes serious stuff in this, and very poignant stuff. You do a bit in the book about the obituaries and those columns, or those strips where, for example, the Bobby Charlton one, you're having to sort of do a tribute to his life, and you want to find the right tone, but as well, there's some serious messaging in the stuff that you do. And I think the medium is really great for that, isn't it? Because people expect funny, and you can give them a bit of funny, but you can make a serious point within those strips. The stuff around the World Cup in Qatar, for example, was really good when it came to migrant workers. Are those the sort of more challenging, more satisfying? Because it is really tough to find that message, to hit the right notes without coming across as you're overly preachy or sanctimonious, but still trying to get that message across in a way that people can enjoy.
Yeah, I think those are the cartoons in the book that I'm probably proudest of, because they are the ones that are the hardest to do. And, it would be so easy to get it wrong and make them mawkish. I do always try to find a funny line if it's possible, or express myself through in a humorous way. But obviously, with some stories, that's not possible. And the obituary ones are an opportunity for me as well to express how those people made me feel. And someone like Terry Venables, for example, who died not that long after Bobby Charlton, the tone of that strip was very different, because he was someone who, for people of a certain age, my age, who, was in my 20s at Euro 96, and, it's just a fun time. And it was when supporting England was fun, and, he was central to that. And obviously someone who loved life, and I did that strip I had him singing, sort of ending the show with Frank Sinatra. I Did It My Way, which is a song I loathe, but had to listen to about 100 times and really, study the lyrics. And then, of course, I had it in my head for weeks afterwards. So really, in this story of, a man tragically passing away, I am the real victim here, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. So, but yeah, those are the ones that give me the most satisfaction.
I have to ask you, before we go, a bit about Arsenal. Good to have some dogs in the background as well. We love a background dog on this podcast. That's no problem at all. Arsenal have given you some good value down the years. Our current manager, maybe one of your easier drawings to produce, given that he is a Lego figure. But there have been some good characters down the years as well from an Arsenal perspective.
Yeah, they have. So the book starts at the beginning of the Unai Emery spell, which obviously didn't work out tremendously well. There's one strip in there which I was really pleased with, which was a time when Mesut Ozil had been left out of the team and no one had seen him for a while, and I did kind of like a Where's Wally parody of various Arsenal characters throughout the history, and, well, let's be honest, the internet. So there's a few sort of meme characters in there. And now, Mikel Arteta, and you're right. I draw him as a Lego man purely because he has that wonderful solid block of black hair. But for me, with the cartoons, it's always about trying to capture a person's character more than their appearance. And I don't need to tell you, he's quite an intense guy. Yeah. And I really enjoy his unorthodox ways of motivating the team, and some of the team talks that came out from the Amazon documentary, and it's good fun. Someone, actually, I'd forgotten to reply to him, and if he's listening, I apologise, but someone from Lego contacted me directly from the design team, and I saw their name come up in my Instagram DMs, and I thought, oh God, this is going to be like a cease and desist thing. But they were saying to me that they were from the design team, and they wanted to point out that although they liked the Lego Arteta character, his hands wouldn't be able to move in the way that I'd drawn them, and his elbows wouldn't be able to move. And pointing out the inaccuracies. And I was tempted to reply and say, yeah, and also he's not made of Lego. God, I feel bad now. I never replied to them, so they probably thought I'd got huffy about it. But I did appreciate the message, and it's I love it if I hear that anyone's reading them.
Well, look, I'm sure the potato industry were up in arms about Sir Chips not being an actual chip. But it's all in there, and there's loads of great stuff in this book, and it does take you through so much of what happens in football that you forget just how much fun it is, and you capture that so well. So look, best of luck with the book. We've got a couple of copies to give away. I'll give people details of that in a moment. But David, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you again to David Squires. The new book is called Chaos in the Box, Chronicles from Modern Football. If you would like to win one of 2 copies of this book, all you have to do is answer this very, very simple question. And we already talked about it just a bit with David there, but which children's toy has inspired his Mikel Arteta drawings? Is it A, Cabbage Patch Kid, B, Lego, or C, My Little Pony? I think it's pretty easy. All you got to do is email your answer, please, to competition@arseblog.com. That is competition@arseblog.com. The random number generator will do its thing next week, pick some winners, and we'll make sure that those books get sent out to you. In the meantime, if you'd like to buy a copy, remember, please buy from your local independent bookstore. They need your business, particularly coming up to Christmas. They'll order the book in for you. If you want to get David Squires' new book, get it from your local independent bookstore. Feel good. help small business, keep the local economy ticking. Right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this particular episode. As ever, thank you so much for being with us. If you want to give us a review in the podcast app of your choice, that would be absolutely fabulous. If you don't want to give us a review, you don't have to, but if you would like to, we'd appreciate it very much. So thank you in advance for that. If you want to hear more about the Everton game on Saturday, we'll be previewing that over on Patreon. You get access to everything that we do on Patreon for just $6 a month. It's patreon.com/Arseblog. And as well as getting lots of extra content for you to listen to and to read every week, it also supports everything that we do on Arseblog. So, for example, the 100th episode of the Arsenal Women Arsecast this week was out. Tim Stillman interviewed Leah Williamson. It's there as a podcast. It's also there as a video. It's a great interview and a great watch. And if you sign up for Patreon, you help us do more like this for everybody. So if you want to do it, it's patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, take it easy, folks, and we will catch you on the next one.
Fans of Arsenal Football Club were today celebrating a new milestone, having seen their team score a goal from open play for the first time in the club's history. Non-executive, executive director, non-director Sir Timothy Lewis said,
"It ain't quite like loafing one in from a corner, but they all can, I suppose."
However, sections of the media have labelled this development as simply unacceptable.